Yellow, everyone. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome once again to the Capital Markets Day. Your Royal Highness, thank you for gracing us once again. Massive thanks to the Honorable Minister for coming to speak so eloquently. My brother Taiwo Oyedede. I mean, the message, the crispness with which you deliver the message is incredible and gives a lot of confidence to the private sector around the intentions and direction of the policy of MTN Nigeria. I'll give my introductory presentation to the audience. I'm going to try to be careful not to steal the thunder of my team, who really delivered the message in a lot more granularity, but I'd like to tease out a few points in going through this. We are very excited. Trying to move my presentation forward. Maybe take me to the text slide, the first slide of my content. We're very excited about where we are in Nigeria today, because we're at the cusp of change. And I think the messages that you've heard delivered from the government officials has really showed that the policy direction of the business is actually, of the country, is looking in a very positive direction. We're already Africa's largest economy and projected to be one of the top 10 economies in the world by 2050 if we get the policy direction right. And the digital economy, as Dr. Tijani spoke to, is going to be a critical driver of our growth in the country today. Our IGDP today starts at 6%, projected to grow to 7 to 12% of GDP by 2050, on top of a growing GDP. And we are the 6th largest population globally, with 220 million people, and we will be, by 2050, probably the 3rd largest country in the world. We have one of the youngest populations in the world, with a median age of 19. And we are the biggest telecoms market in Africa, with 220 million subscribers and 47% unique mobile penetration growth. We continue to expect growth in the base, in the subscriber base of this market, and it's one of the few markets that offers this. In fact, we're actually one of the few markets that offers not just a continued growth in the foundation of our business, which is voice, but very fast growth in the major growth trajectory today of data. And on top of that, you layer the massive potential that we see in fintech and digital services and home broadband, fixed broadband solutions. It actually offers a significant trajectory in terms of growth on a long-term sustained basis for the next few years. Mobile data is driving the majority of our growth. We're over 40% in terms of revenue growth, more than that in traffic growth. And we see that continue to be driven by a few things. One, consumption of our subscribers is increasing. Two, smartphone penetration is still at relatively low base, projected to go to 74% from about 54% in 2027. And then, of course, a very fast-growing fintech ecosystem. And then we have a thriving entertainment media startup industry. Next slide, please. Is there a way to lift the presentation a bit higher up in the projection? Because there's some points at the bottom which are not showing up there. If the tech people can do that. We're definitely in a difficult macro time. Thank you. We're definitely in a difficult macro time, but we've been through these cycles before. And yes, devaluation of our currency does impact our margins, but if you look at the cycles of MTN Nigeria, devaluations that have happened, we've had devaluations from 200 Naira to 386 Naira. Each time that happens, a year or two later, MTN Nigeria has managed to once again take our margins back to the historical base that they were. So we've seen this cycle a few times, cycle driven by global macroeconomic and geopolitical volatilities, rising energy costs, food inflation, and of course our peculiar and significant exchange rate volatility. Why are we optimistic? As I've said, we've gone through this before, 2016, 2020, and we came out stronger, and I'll show you in the next chart what has happened to our margins over this time. There's a very strong and clear commitment from the leadership of the country, represented in person here, speaking to the capital markets today, in terms of the policy direction and the critical expected contribution by the private sector towards the economy, and creating a business-friendly environment through the taxation and fiscal policies. There's a commitment, clearly made commitment, it's been restated in many, many forums, including yesterday, that the historical backdrop of forex liquidity is going to be honored. And they are being progressively honored. About 2 weeks ago, some funds were released to the international banks. Towards the end of last week, additional funds were released to local banks for outstanding forex obligation at the historical rates. The news on that will come clear. And then, of course, we are looking at optimistically and hopefully towards reforms in the oil and gas sector to drive production and ensure the security of output production. Next slide, please. So this shows you, and there's an exception maybe somewhere here around the time of the fine where our EBITDA margins drop very low. The historical 60% margins are associated with when we were primarily a voice-driven revenue base. But every time we've had a devaluation, such as here, we've seen, there was a devaluation here as well, we've seen that the EBITDA margins do recover back. And Modupe will talk to the drivers of the recovery of our margins, top line growth, efficiency, et cetera, et cetera. So the message here is every time there's a devaluation and there's a table at the bottom, a year, 2 years later, EBITDA margins recover. Yes, we do take a hit on a short-term basis, but EBITDA margins recover. Next slide, please. Why are we optimistic? Well, there's a number of reasons for that. One of them is comparative to maybe 4 or 5 years ago, we're in an exceptionally strong competitive position. 4 or 5 years ago, we were growing 13 to 16%, below the growth rate, maybe half the growth rate of our most significant competitors. Today, we are growing at the same pace as our competitors, in a lot of instances at a slightly higher rate. And on the primary driver of revenue growth, which is data, we're growing at a much higher rate than our competitors. So we're in a very strong competitive position. We're one of the, no, keep it on that slide, please. We're one of the very few markets in the world today where we continue to see voice revenue growth. Double-digit voice revenue growth if you look at the performance year to date. We're capturing the largest share of the data revenue growth in this market. We have a strong leadership position in technology terms. We've taken the lead in 5G. We have coverage advantage on 5G that is multiple times superior to that of the closest competition. And I think most of your networks that you roaming in towards on MTN Nigeria will have experienced our 5G. This morning I tested in this hall, of course before we had a lot of people in, and I got 1.2 gigabits per second, but I've been consistently achieving 500-600 megabits per second in this hall. And it's not that we have a special solution for this event, it's the same solution that we use in the Hilton at any point in time. So we're the first mover on 5G. We have undertaken a sales and distribution transformation which used to be our Achilles heel. It will be completed by the end of this year. We're going to have very efficient sales and distribution, capillarity in the sales and distribution, which is going to help our mobile money business. But back to why it's exciting, we're going on voice, we're going significantly on data, and we're just starting the journey around fintech. And you can see the sustained growth of data. Data traffic continues to grow at an incredible pace. A lot of people thought this was a COVID phenomenon. On the contrary, post-COVID, digitization of the economy is continuing to accelerate. And you can see data usage per subscriber has gone up multiple-fold over the last few years as smartphone penetration continues to rise. We're at 53% smartphone penetration, projected to go to 74%. If the economy and the GDP growth will grow at a faster pace, we'll be approaching the likes of other countries which are close to 90%. So a lot of people are going to come into the data space, and the existing base are going to use a lot more volumes of data. So that's a key driver of growth. We're just at the beginning of our fintech story. Ellie will speak to you. 97% of transactions in Nigeria are done on a cash basis. Eventually, that's all going to be converted to digital currency. And that's an exceptional opportunity in terms of transaction volumes. There was a dip as a result of the cash crisis and the excessive load on the financial electronic systems. So we did see a dip at the beginning of this year, but we expect this curve to grow at a much faster trajectory. Next slide, please. So just to recap of our Ambition 2025, I won't dwell on the next slide too long. We're building the largest and most valuable platforms on the base of our industry-leading connectivity operations. We continue to create shared value across all the ecosystems and the environments in which we operate, and we're accelerating our portfolio transformation. Next slide. So how are we going to deliver all of this? With voice, we're ramping up our gross connections with our revamped sales and distribution. We're revamping our voice proposition. I think the regulators and the Honorable Minister, the policymakers understand that the sustainability of the industry is critical. And while our utopia, which we're working towards, is a raise in the price floor and an ability to adjust prices within the industry on our own, not having to go back for every single price packages, there is some flexibility in the current pricing structures that we have. We have flexibility to reduce bonuses. We have some packages which we're adjusting on an ongoing basis with full regulatory approval, and we're using to optimize our effective rate per minute and our yield of our packages and bundles. We continue to drive our rural penetration, and our sales and distribution is effectively, by the end of this year, completely digitized. Our data is being driven by sustained increase in data traffic, driven by demand from customers, rising smartphone penetration, and quite aggressive expansion of our 4G and 5G coverage. On Own the Home, I'm very excited about Own the Home. I think this is almost virgin territory. The largest fiber to the home operator today has 67,000 homes passed. We think this is virgin territory, which is important for us to capture from a value creation perspective for a multitude of reasons. One, there's a lot of demand in that space. And we are one of the few companies that have the capacity to actually invest on a sustained basis and drive fiber to the X. The largest competitor, 67,000 homes passed. If we only spend 3–4% of our capital expenditure focusing on this space, we think there's, in the long term, 40 million homes to be connected. And we're using very skilled tools, using geospatial analysis, movement of people, traffic existing on our 5G, 4G, 5G networks to select the locations that we're focusing on. And in the best examples, Hassan will tell, we're getting as much as a 75% home passed to homes connected ratio, which delivers incredible returns. Generally, once you're above 25%, you have good returns on the fiber to the X space. In our new rollout, we're getting somewhere around 50% ratio of home passed to homes connected. So successful targeted deployment of fiber to the X, one. Two, really quite an empty competitive space because of the capital requirement. Three, we have a balance sheet and an income statement that can support the drive into that space much better than any of the competition, and we're learning very smartly how to do that. Ellie is one of the most important speakers in this space, so I don't want to steal his thunder. Serene is here, Group FinTech Head. He's going to speak to you extensively about what we intend to do and how we intend to drive our FinTech business. We understand clearly the problem that we're solving for customers in this market. We have created the governance structures, put the systems in place to focus and accelerate, and we'll be delivering on that space. We're excited about it. I think we've gotten all the heavy lifting behind us. We're now focusing on execution. Digital Nigeria is an exceptional country that offers so many opportunities and exported a lot of countries, a lot of content across the world. So we're focusing on gaming, OTT video, digital advertising, music and audio, e-health, focusing on local content, but also we're quite advanced in some of the most advanced partnerships you see in Africa with the likes of Apple, etc. And enterprise is a space that we don't talk about extensively, but the growth in enterprise is somewhere between 30% and 40% every year. So it's actually over-indexing our total growth. So we're doing really well in that space. We've continued to grow our market and value share in that space. Next slide, please. Quickly, on our Ambition 2025, we're about halfway on the Ayoba mobile users. This is, of course, the number that's going to be most interesting to all the investors here. We're heading towards 30 to 40 million Momo users. Some work to be done there, but we've got the basics in place. Our active Momo agents, really good trajectory, forward indicator of where the mobile money business is going. Active data users, we're very comfortable. I think we're very comfortable in that space. 43 million. We're projecting another 7 to 17 million in the next 2 years or so. Home broadband, we're actually ahead of our target on the home broadband. At this point in time, primarily driven by 5G. 5G has been actually a positive surprise in terms of relative to when we launched, the quantity of traffic that we're carrying on 5G, quite impressive. We're carrying the range of 27, 28% of our traffic on 5G on sites where we have 5G co-located. And that is actually rising, so very successful. We're number one in NPS overall, and also number one in network NPS with a double-digit lead in NPS, so very satisfactory. ESG ratings, primary focus area, we're already in top quartile. We're ahead of our target on reputation index, and localization of MTN Nigeria will proceed as the economic conditions are ready for that. And then we're proceeding with the structural separation of our businesses. Next slide, please. So, creating shared value, well on track. Mohammed Rufai, our CTO, who has that in his targets, well on track in terms of our net zero emissions by 2040. We're actually slightly ahead of our targets. We use multiplicity of levers. Even within our offices, we ensure that our power systems, our lighting systems are sensor controlled. We're focusing on our water usage. We've connected it to independent power plants to drive our switching centers. In terms of digital inclusion, we're at 90% broadband penetration. Financial inclusion is a big space where we want to focus on. We've paid to the government since inception 4.2 trillion in taxes, actually more than we've paid in dividends. We hope that will reverse over time. And through our foundation, we've invested over 26 billion and touched every single local government in Nigeria and close to 18 million people in terms of the impact of our foundation. Next slide, please. We're an enabler of our socio-economic development. We are a carrier of carriers. So somewhat the entire technology space and the telco space in some way or the other relies on us. We carry over 100 ISPs and ICT resellers. We connect a lot of government institutions. We provide network infrastructure to support the financial services industry. With over 12 billion transactions passing through our internet and USSD. And we've committed to the refurbishment of Enugu-Onitsha Expressway. That project has started. It had a slight pause, but we're restarting now. So that will be done under the RITC scheme. We create in Nigeria, and this is to some extent why we have a voice on the table, through directly and indirectly over 2 million jobs. As Temiso spoke so eloquently about, we're the first digital offer with over 139,000 direct shareholders in MTN Nigeria. And we've spoken about our foundation and our partnership with the Nigerian Football Federation, football being the all-important sport in Nigeria, and now with Nigerian athletics. Next slide, please. Just a few of our awards and recognitions. We were awarded by the FIRS, the Inland Revenue Service, one of the most tax-compliant companies in Nigeria, one of the top tax-paying companies in Nigeria. We're the most compliant company on the Nigerian Stock Exchange, as awarded by the NGX. Best company in financial reporting, listed company of the year, largest commercial papers. Modupe will speak to the rates at which our long-term debts are, and that is how that is actually below the sovereign borrowing rate. And a host of other awards in brands, finance, etc., etc. Next slide. So looking ahead, what do we have to look forward to? We remain the leading mobile operator and provider of telecommunication services. And we are going to protect our market share. We have a very effective sales and distribution now. It was somewhat our Achilles heel. We brought in Shino to fix that. He's advanced very well, fully digitized. We have a significant lead on 5G. We will maintain that lead and continue to be the leading technology company in Nigeria. We have a strong competitive advantage over every segment of our business, and we're well positioned for the long term. Our focus on fiber to the X, fiber to the home, is built on the platform that will have the widest fiber network in Nigeria. And we're focusing on that on the home rigorously. The demographics are extremely exciting. Largest telco market, it's big. Nigeria scales in everything that it does. Fast-growing youthful population, and still relatively low internet penetration or low smartphone penetration, even though now our data revenue is starting to exceed voice revenue. And remember, voice revenue is still growing. And we have an attractive return profile with double-digit revenue growth. We captured the largest share of data revenue. strong cash flow generation, consistent dividend payments, and very, very moderate leverage, as Mutuwa will speak to. And all of this is anchored around a disciplined capital allocation, very strict governance, enhanced risk and regulatory framework, and a commitment to create shared value with our stakeholders in the economy and the country. Key takeaway points, next slide please. We remain committed to our Ambition 2025 strategy. It's a bit of a repetition of the previous slide. We will capture growth opportunities presented by sustained higher demand for data. We'll focus on Own the Home. This is going to be a significant opportunity for us because over time, more people are getting connected, getting educated, health, etc. in the home, and some traffic will eventually migrate from mobile to the home, but that's still a long way out. We drive growth of active mobile Momo wallets and the fintech ecosystem. I don't want to speak too much on that because Eddie has a very granular presentation on it. We continue to focus on our expense efficiencies and disciplined capital allocation, and Ambition 2025 delivery is underpinned by a very strong management team and a very healthy culture, a culture of collaboration, openness, and transparency, and everyone has a word to say. So that's my presentation, but before I wrap up, I want to proactively address a few issues which might come up before the question and answer sessions. The first one is there's been a lot of talk around the tax matter. Is Nigeria, MTN Nigeria, do we have a strained relationship with authorities, etc., etc.? And I think that's somewhat exaggerated, and I'll tell you why. This 47 million tax administrative tribunal matter, first of all, started as a $2 billion issue, $800 million of customs and $1.28 million of tax issues. After rigorous assessment by the FIRS, we were eventually given a bill of $135 million odd, which we contested, and it brought it down effectively to an amount which is still disputed. So we've gone from $2 billion to $47 million. So that's one. The second thing is the administration has been very, very clear. And if the executive chairman of the FIRS was in the country, he would have been here himself. They are not going to do anything that's going to cause consternation to investors. This is a process which we go through, and these taxes are relating to the period 2007 to 2017, historical issues. So, great relationship, we're compliant, we're respected by the authorities. We have the chairman of the Presidential Committee on Fiscal and Tax Reform here to speak to us on that. But those things have to wash out with time. That's the first thing I wanted to mention. And I think I'd like to reaffirm that we believe through our humility, through our stakeholder engagement, we have a very strong relationship with this government. And we'll continue to reinforce that. I've always said stakeholder relationships are like riding a bicycle up a hill. The minute you stop putting effort into it, you slide backwards. So we spend an inordinate amount of time with our stakeholders in Abuja. In the last 3 weeks, I've been to Abuja 7 times from Lagos to engage with various stakeholders. So we think we have a great relationship. We'll have a few arguments and a few disputes, but the quality of the key stakeholders in President Tinubu's cabinet is evidenced by the people who have spoken to us today. And they understand the private sector, they understand how it can drive the economy, and it's very well supported. Finally, there's been a few questions around the move of our portfolio away from IHS to another tower provider, and whether that was something which bore any risk for us. That decision went through a very rigorous assessment process, also a risk assessment process. And just to give you some frame and context, we're moving 2,500 sites. They're not new sites. A lot of these are in urban areas. You can simply figure out that if our closest competitor has similar coverage to us, they probably have towers in the similar locations. And so there's quite a number of towers out of the portfolio that we're moving that are already in existence. And with frequency planning, the right tools, etc., a lot of those towers, I won't get down to specifics, I'll leave you to come to those assumptions, are already in existence with ATC and the spattering of other tower providers. You can tell about this by knowing that Airtel, our competitor, has similar coverage to us. So that tells you that there's certainly enough infrastructure around the place to take the majority of those towers. There's another 1,500 towers which are expiring over the course of the next 2 years. We will go through the same rigorous process of evaluation and come to the right decision for MTN Nigeria. What are we looking for? We're looking for efficiency. We're looking for ways to continuously improve our margins. We're looking for ways to ensure that this growth of our tower expenditure is managed in line with the growth of the top line, and we'll always take the right decision for MTN Nigeria investors. So that's it. Thank you very much. I think there's a question and answer session. The main substance comes from the great gentlemen, Eli, Hassan, and Modukwe. And unfortunately, it really sounds bad. There's like 4 gentlemen presenting. But in the management team, executive management team of MTN Nigeria, I think we lead in MTN Group. I think there's a few Ghana, etc., who are as well as us. And in Nigeria, we're recognized as the most gender-balanced management team. So half of our management team, ladies, stand up. Half of our executive management team in MTN Nigeria are women. And we're very proud of that. Thank you.